believe we have all 7, so you are ready to go whenever.
I think we have 1 more minute from my, let's wait till 7 o'clock, just so 6:59 I see, but.
All right, how are those clocks looking now? Are we good? Are we live? Everyone feeling loose, ready to do this thing? March 8th, City of Albany Arts Committee call to order. We will do roll call, followed by approval of the minutes. And then when we get to announcements, we have some new members. So we'll have everybody go through and do an introduction, which we missed last week. So we'll make sure that we get a chance to do that. But to start with, we will call this meeting to order. And for roll call, if you could unmute yourself when I call you and just say here or present, that would be fantastic. Member Bergman.
Present.
Member Black. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes. Here.
Great. Member Goodman.
Here.
Member Abrams.
Here.
Member Samansky. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Here.
Great. And Member Richards.
Present.
Fantastic. All right, the first order on our agenda, let's see how efficient we can be tonight, is the approval of the minutes. Hopefully you've had a chance to look over the minutes from last week's meeting. I guess we do this as a roll call, as a call also. So when I call you, if you can just say yay or nay for the approval of the minutes. And just to keep it lively, let's go in reverse order. Member Richards.
Yay, but I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a way to time box our sections of the discussion?
We will try and keep caps on some of the discussion moments, and certainly when we get into some of the discussion points, I will definitely put a time that we will try to accomplish what we need to accomplish for tonight.
Okay, yay.
Great suggestion. Member Samansky, do you approve
Aye.
the minutes? Okay, and Member Abrams?
Yes.
Member
Yeah.
Goodman?
Sorry, Chair Aaron, Chair Gash, you're doing so great. We do need a motion and a second in order to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I second it.
Okay. My mistake. I apologize. So one more time, if we could. Now that we have a motion to approve the minutes, Member Richards, do you approve the minutes?
Yay.
Member Samansky, do you approve?
Yes.
Member Abrams, do you approve?
Yes.
Member Goodman, do you approve?
Yes.
Member Black, do you approve?
Yes.
And Member Bergman, do you approve?
Yes.
Fantastic. Then we have approval of the minutes. Is there any public comment for the minutes? No? Great. Love that. Then moving forward, we will get to the next item of the agenda, which is announcements. And I would like to begin announcements again, just by introducing all of the committee members. And if we can go around and just say your name, if you're new to the committee or how long you've been on the committee, and a little bit about yourself and your interest and qualifications for being on the Arts Committee. That would be really delightful. Would anyone like to go first? Great. Member Richards, if you would.
I'm Daly Richards. I'm new to the committee and all of the rules of government. I'm interested in the arts in general, and I've done 25 years of program management, so I'm good at organizing things, and I'd like to organize things that I'm interested in.
Fantastic. Thank you. Would someone like to go next?
I'll go. My name is Sarah Samansky. I'm new to the committee. I've lived in Albany since 1983. I taught art at Albany High School for 25 years and theater ensemble for 22. And I own a architectural design business with my husband.
Great, thank you. And next, Member Goodman.
Yes, I'm Peter Goodman. I've lived in Albany for 35 years. I believe I've been on the Arts Committee for over 10 years. I've been its chair on several occasions. My interest in books, I've got a small independent publishing company located on Solano Avenue called Stonebridge Press. We publish books about mostly Asian culture, and that has led me into my interest in the arts, literary arts, and especially.
Great, thank you. Member
I'll
Black.
go next.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheryl Black. I've been on the Arts Committee for probably about 9 years. I have lived in Albany 35 years. I am a retired caterer. I've always been interested in the arts. I run the gallery for the Arts Committee.
Great, thank you.
I guess I can go next.
Great, thank you.
I'm Robert Abrams, and around here, I guess my closest tie to Albany is the Abrams Claghorn Gallery, which I've owned and run for the last 6 years. I also am a part owner of the Potter Studio in Berkeley and another pottery studio in Emeryville, in El Cerrito. And I've been part of the arts community around here for about 20 years. And beyond that, I have about 40 years of retail experience.
Great, thank you. And Member Bergman.
I'm Emily Bergman. I'm new to the committee. I taught Spanish literature at UC Berkeley for 40 years. And one of my fields was literature and visual arts. So those two areas are I like to bring them together. And I've lived here since 1986, and it seemed like a good time to get involved in my community's art, in the arts in this community. So.
Great, thank you and welcome. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Aaron Gatch. I'm chair of this committee by some amazing stroke of luck. And I'm also a professional artist and an art professor. I currently teach at California College of the Arts in the Sculpture, Individualized and Community Arts major, and also in the Critical Ethnic Studies program. And I've also taught locally at a couple of other schools, UC Santa Cruz and Stanford. And I've exhibited locally and nationally and internationally, mostly in community arts and socially engaged art projects. And I've been in Albany for somewhere around 20 years. So welcome everyone. This is a great group. Should we keep it moving and check in and see if there are any other announcements? Liam.
Thank you, Chair. I was trying to find my unmute. I just have a couple of staff announcements here. First of all, committee members, if you haven't done so yet, please put wet ink signatures on your oath of office. You will have been contacted directly by our city clerk, Ann Sue. Her or myself will remind you, but please, if you got that email from our city clerk, to sign the oath of office with wet ink and drop it off in person to Albany City Hall. Discussions, again, just a quick reminder, discussions, let's try to have ourselves always muted. And then if you'd like to talk, either raise the hand emoji, which is on your actions for your Zoom at the bottom of the bar, or you can physically raise your hand. That just helps kind of cross talking over. And since we're all gonna practice staff as well on muting ourselves when we are not talking, that just kind of reminds us to unmute ourselves when it's time to talk. And then the last announcement is that there is an advisory body and Brown X training on March 18th, 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. It's going to be a great opportunity to ask questions to staff and city attorney about the Brown Act, about being a committee member, and also interactions that we've been having to do digitally via Zoom and emails. So it's a wonderful training to attend, and there has been a save the date sent out, and an invitation will follow soon after. Thank you, Aaron.
Great, thank you. Member Abrams.
Yeah, I saw that Brown Act thing and I would like to attend, but I have work conflict with that. Will it be recorded so I can at least skim through it?
Yes, it will be recorded. Yep, and we'll pass along that link to you.
Okay, great.
Great, any other announcements? Okay, then we will move forward to the next agenda item, which is presentations. We have a presentation from Community Development Planning Manager Ann Hirsch. Is Ann Hirsch here?
I'm here.
Oh,
Good
great.
evening.
There you are. There you are, hiding.
Yeah, good evening,
Welcome.
and welcome to the new members of the Arts Committee. For my presentation tonight, I'm going to share my screen and give you an overview of how the Art and Public Places Ordinance works in the City of Albany. So for your review this evening, I'm going to give you just some historical information and background on the Art and Public Places Ordinance, which is contained in Chapter 20 of the city's municipal code. That's the zoning code. I'll explain how the ordinance works, identify a couple examples of projects, and then give you an explanation in regards to the fee collection and its applicability for public art. So to give you some background, the ordinance was established on October 1st in 2007. It's ordinance 07-04. If you're looking through the city's municipal code, it's section 20.56. Accompanying that ordinance, the council also adopted resolution 07-60, which establishes standards for the implementation of art in public places. And within that, the fee that is calculated for public art is 1.75% of the project fees, and that's based on our master fee schedule. So if a developer is subject to the requirement, when they apply for a building permit, we calculate the fee based on our fee schedule, not the actual construction cost of what they pay. It's based on city fees. So in terms of applicability, the public art ordinance applies to new commercial development, which is subject to review, what we refer to as discretionary review, meaning it goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The same review applies to new multifamily development as well. And also projects which exceed $300,000 in construction costs, and that's tied up to the council resolution that was adopted in 2007. So those are the three thresholds which trigger the requirements for the public art ordinance. So for those first two items I mentioned, new commercial development and new multifamily development, A condition of approval, which is our standard language, is included and lets that project sponsor know that they are required to comply with that section of the code. For those projects which meet the $300,000 threshold, we simply collect a fee as part of the building permit application, and that gets located then into the Public Art Fund. So for developers who are subject to the Public Art Ordinance and they opt to include artwork in their project, there is a separate process. So they have to formally file an application for design review with the Community Development Department, and they pay the fees associated with that. The next step in that is to take it to the Arts Committee for your review, in which time you would make a recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their action. We take your recommendation, we then schedule it for Planning and Zoning Commission review, and they take action on the request. It is appealable to the City Council, and we have had this happen before, but generally it goes Arts Committee and Planning and Zoning Commission. And if that approval lasts the 14-day appeal period, it's considered a final approval. If not, it gets scheduled then for City Council review. The current application fee for this process is $3,165, and that overall time frame is about 7 to 10 weeks. For developers who choose to not include art on site, they may also satisfy the requirements of the code by paying an in lieu fee. And so that is calculated as part of the building permit, and we collect that fee at the time of building permit issuance. So we get that money up front prior to any shovel going into the ground, and we put that into the Public Art Fund. So those are the two options. It can either be included on site or we collect a fee, but those are the two ways to satisfy the requirements. We have had a few projects in recent years that have opted to include public art as part of their project. Toyota of Berkeley, which is on East Shore, has a bench on site that several of the committee members have seen in the past. And more close to Central Albany, you can look at the UC Village project. There's the Bruce Beasley sculpture that's at Belmont Village. And then the City Lab sculpture, which is part of the shopping center and is visible from the parking lot. And both of those projects went before the Arts Committee. And in fact, the City Lab sculpture, which you see today, had actually gone through that appeals process. So that was the example I was thinking of, just to show the different steps within the review. More recently, we've had a couple projects that will be subject to the arts fee, or they could be incorporated on site. Portland Canes, which is a townhouse development located at Portland and Canes, so behind the Aosin restaurant. It's currently under construction. They paid an in lieu fee at the time of their building permit issuance, so we have that. 423 Evelyn is a 14-unit apartment building that was approved in January. As of right now, we don't have a formal building permit application submittal, so I'm not sure which direction they're going to proceed, whether they pay the fee or they elect to include something on site. So that's to be determined. But one way or the other, they'll satisfy the requirements of the code. And then 904 Masonic, which is actually going to go to our commission later this spring, will also be subject to the public arts fee. And in past discussions, the applicants have expressed interest in potentially doing the artwork on site, but it's still a little bit to be determined. So we'll keep you posted as to where that lands. Liam had mentioned in preparation for tonight that a question would come up about the applicability of public art funds and how they can be used. And I understand this question has come up in the past. So I consulted with the city attorney on this, who referenced case law. There was a case in the late 90s that went all the way to the US Supreme Court and effectively upholds a legal determination that requires jurisdictions to show the nexus between the fee charged and the use of those funds. So as it would apply to the public art ordinance, we collect a fee derived from construction. And so the fees that are associated with that have to be used towards the construction. In this case, it's public art, but this is really a fee that's no different that the city might collect for transportation or public parks. The intent is that it's there to serve a public good. Similarly, within the government code, there is a mitigation fee act, which applies to development projects. Specifically, it's government code section 66000. Defines the fees, local agency project, and public facilities. And it further, in the next section, identifies the purpose of the fees, and it notes that there must be a reasonable relationship between the proposed use of the fee, in this case public art, project development, as well as the public needs. So kind of goes back to that case law I mentioned in the previous slide, that when we collect the fee, it's intended there for a public use. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have related to the public arts ordinance.
Great, thank you, Anne. Are there any questions?
Really quickly, Aaron, before we get going, I just also want to mention that since this is a presentation, committee members, especially new committee members, feel free to ask Anne any questions about the presentation that she gave. Also know that we will use this information further in our work plan discussion and our PAPP discussion. But as the presentation, there can be no motion or action on this. We can put it on a future agenda item to further talk about or make a motion later on. Anyways, let's just leave this time for any specific questions for Anne, and then we can touch back on how this affects us in the future agenda items.
I'll start off, and I have a question. Thank you very much. That was really a great presentation. One question was the recommendation from the city attorney. Is that from the current city attorney or from the previous city attorney?
That's from the current city attorney.
From
so
the current.
I spoke to Mala last week about this, and as I was preparing the presentation.
And was her recommendation that that this was a determining factor in terms of the types of public art, or just that the funds had to be used for public art?
Well, I think in this case, it's that they be used for public art, but public art being more of a permanent, a permanent installation type of project.
Was that like a legal determination, or is that a sort of a policy interpretation?
Legal interpretation. It again goes back to the notion that because we collect a fee associated with construction for public art, that it would then be some sort of permanent public art installation. So basically you're collecting fees subject to a building permit application. It's going to have to, it would be tied to a permanent installation. And again, if a developer elects to pay that in lieu fee, it's at the discretion of this committee how they choose to use funds within the public art fund, if that's to finance other projects that may be city sponsored.
Is that in any way at odds with the way the city ordinance is constructed?
No, that's actually consistent with how the city ordinance is constructed.
Okay. So for example, in the city ordinance, I noticed that that art, one of the ways in which art may be defined is digital or electronic art. Mm-hmm. And that's consistent with that definition of construction then?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speculate too much on an example, but I think there was some consideration a few years ago of like a digital installation that would have had public visibility, would have been on private property, but any member of the public could see it, and that would have met the intent for that.
So if there, for example, if there were a public art project that manifested towards the end of the project in a digital form, that would be sufficient for meeting that standard?
Yeah, I mean, it would be subject to the review of this body. And you would have the discretion to require changes or that kind of thing. But digital art could be one form in which the ordinance could be satisfied.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Member Goodman.
Yes. Can you tell us about how much money is currently in the in the Art and Public Places Fund, and roughly how much is represented by the to be determined projects you mentioned?
So I have not yet calculated out those to be determined projects, in part because we don't actually have the building permit application. So we don't, when we do that, I don't want to get super technical, but we're looking at fixture counts and square footage and you know, the project as a whole, and that's how we derive that fee. So I don't have that information readily available. As far as the remaining balance within that fund, I would have to check with the finance department, and that's oh, looks like Liam has the answer.
I do. It's 1,800. Sorry, started that poorly. $187,392.35, and that has recently increased by $60,000 for a very recent payment, which Anne alluded to earlier, is those townhouses on Canes near Portland.
Okay, thank you for that, ma'am. Are there any other questions?
Well,
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
member. No, go ahead, Member Goodman.
Well, getting back to the point that you were making, Aaron, I understand that was a decision by the attorney, but if we wanted to probe that decision in a little more detail and kind of explore what some of the limits of public art might be and what the different forms might be that would be legally acceptable, what would be the best way of going about that?
Is that a question for Anne?
Yes.
Okay, I thank you for the
I'm sorry, Ann.
I think actually it would probably be best if Liam or Liam and I jointly reached out to Mala. You know, I'm not licensed to practice law, so I would be reluctant to render an opinion of a legal nature, but I think she could provide more specific guidance to the committee.
Okay, that sounds good.
And can I ask, in your conversation with the attorney, I noticed that just looking over the ordinance here, that there's, in describing the work that, quote, may include different forms of art, there's also a following section that says what it specifically excludes. And some of the forms of artwork that the committee has been interested in supporting are not specifically stated in the exclusions, nor are they stated in the may include category. I also am not a lawyer at all. I don't have a legal background, but my understanding is that when, especially in relation to civic law, that when you use that term may as opposed to must, that it opens up a whole can of worms. Did you have any conversations with the attorney in that regard?
We didn't talk about the specifics of, so the way we do it in the planning world is there's should and shall means it's a mandated requirement. Should means you have some flexibility as far as policy discretion goes. And I'm curious, I have the ordinance up here in a different window. You're looking at page 2 of the exemptions.
Actually, page 1, under public artwork. It says public artwork means and may include sculpture, monument, mural, fountains, fresco, relief, painting, drawing, etching, original print and collage, mosaic, ceramic, weaving, carving, stained glass, wood, metal, plastic, textiles, earthworks, digital art, or electronic art. And then it says the following items are not to be considered following that section.
So just so I'm clear, would the interest be to modify the language in that section to accommodate or identify other types of permissible public art?
Yes.
Okay. In this case, so I think that would actually dovetail into probably a work plan. request. Sorry, Liam, I saw that. the smile there. But that would be the way to do it, would be to amend the code to modify that definition.
And can you speak to if that is modified, does that change anything from the developer's standpoint?
I don't think so. I mean, if this definition were to be expanded, it would give them some additional options as far as artwork that they could consider including on site.
And so anything that the committee is essentially, anything the developer is allowed to do, the committee would be allowed to do. It would be similar, is that right?
I guess just so I'm clear, we're in that definition, we're looking at other forms of artwork that would be acceptable to the committee. And so you would effectively be expanding the definition of public artwork, but you would keep the exclusions the same.
Yeah, my understanding, again, from a very limited non-legal background, is that currently the way the ordinance written is that there's no obligation clause. That's a must clause requiring that the art form must take any of the forms that are suggested there. But the language around the exclusion is written as an obligation clause. So certain things are definitely excluded, but the things that are permissible are in the category of may or shall.
That's correct. Yeah. And the intent, I believe, with the exclusions is that you effectively have a project sponsor who's not going to say their landscaping would suffice for art. That's going to be a separate requirement that they have to fulfill, and they would have to do a public art requirement as well.
That makes perfect sense to me too. But if there's not an obligation clause in the first part, I don't even know that we would need to rewrite the ordinance as long as it's still passing through committee.
Right. Yeah. And I think, in this other applications that I've mentioned in the past, they reference this, and, in at least the UC Village, for example, they have opted in with sculptures. I know some other applicants who've considered installation on site have also talked about the potential for murals and that type of thing. So this kind of gives them a nice offering of options for things to consider.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne. Yeah,
also just quickly mention that the Public Arts Master Plan, I pulled it up as well, has a list of what is acceptable as far as the definition of public art as well. So a good source to reference.
Great. Thank you. Member Goodman?
I was around at the time that this ordinance was drafted along with the master plan. And I don't think the intent of the people who wrote it, who were city planners with a lot of experience in this, was to intentionally build vagueness in so that there would be wiggle room. I think actually they had a very specific idea of what public art was. So if we want something different from this, I think it's incumbent upon us to spell it out explicitly.
Great. Thank you, Member Goodman. Any other comments or questions? Great. Well, thank you so much, Anne, for coming in, stopping by, and dropping some knowledge on us. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Do we have any public comment?
We do. We have one. And if you stick around just for a second here.
Okay, and if we have public comment, can we put a time on the public comment limited to 2 minutes, please? Can we limit public comments to 2 minutes? And keeping in mind, this is public comment specific to the agenda item, which is the presentation. And we would just ask members of the public to keep their comments specific to the agenda item at hand. So it looks like we have Jeremiah with us. Welcome, Jeremiah.
Hi, thank you. I just want to say that was a great presentation, by the way. I mean, first and foremost, that was a wonderful presentation. Really, I really like that presentation. You know, also, I was just kind of curious, $300,000 approximately for the city is offering a grant or some sort of construction or some sort of money, and then the application for the artist is to fill out an application, which the application fee is $3,000, $3,100 something dollars for application fee, and then the artist might not even get selected or something. And then, I mean, is there some sort of funding, or that seems like a really expensive application fee, $3,000. I didn't, maybe I misinterpreted the presentation on the public art. You know, I'm just not 100% sure. That's seems like a lot of money in both directions, $300,000 for public art, and then also the application fee just in general. So I'm not sure exactly where the money's coming from the city, where the money's coming from the budget. Is it the sugar, sweet, and soda beverage tax general fund? And I'm not sure where the money's coming from the art. That's a lot of money for art. I hope it, you know, is a drinking fountain or something, some sort of, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
I can clarify a little bit. So the $3,000 application fee that I mentioned in the presentation, that is typically paid for by the project sponsor. So the artist who is involved doesn't actually pay that fee. It's the developer who pays that fee on behalf of the art that they are trying to incorporate. So that's how that process works. And with respect to the $300,000 threshold, that's for other projects that like a commercial tenant improvement, that kind of thing. So a new store, a new restaurant comes to town, they're upgrading the building, and they exceed that $300,000 threshold. That's when we would then calculate the public art fee, and that would be paid as part of their building permit fee. So it's not actually a dollar amount of $300,000. It's a portion of that, depending on you know, what the overall construction cost estimate comes out to be.
Great. Thank you, Anne. Do we have any other public comment? All right. Well, Anne, thank you once again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Have a good evening.
All right, you too.
Take care.
Next agenda item is discussion and possible action on matters related to the following items. The first item is the sculpture loan program. Do we have a report from the sculpture loan program committee?
We do. Okay, I want to make sure I'm unmuted here. Okay. Thank you, Chair Gash. So item 6.1 is a follow-up on a previous agenda item that has been on our agenda in the recent years, and it is the sculpture loan program. And you should have all received the staff report in your packet this week. And I'm going to go over kind of a little bit of the staff report, a little bit of the history, kind of what we're going to be taking on today. We have a short presentation, PowerPoint presentation here on the locations and what we are asking of the committee. And then Eva will also chime in with some updates as well. So the Arts Committee shall review the existing selection of sculptures and locations along the Ohlone Greenway and provide input on the scope and design of the 2 concrete pads required for the installation of those art pieces. So what's before you today, Arts Committee, and what we are recommending your action on this item is to provide input on the design of the 2 concrete sculpture pads, as well as the placement of the selected sculptures. So just as a quick background, again, the sculpture loan program is a fantastic way to have, ribeye public art for pot roast price. So the artists are local artists, and they're able to show off their sculptures in an application process that we put in these specific locations. And the benefit for the committee and the city as well is that you get beautiful, bold public art pieces for a much lower cost than it is to purchase the art or to have an artist create them for a specific location. The artists are responsible for transportation, delivery, installation, and removal of the sculpture. The installation of the sculpture is the responsibility of the artist, and the city of Albany may assist to ensure proper installation. And the artist will maintain the sculpture, or sorry, the artist shall maintain the sculpture, and the city will maintain the site, the base, and the plaque for as long as the agreement lasts. And there is a $1,000 stipend to the artist to defray the costs. At the end of the two-year long agreement, the city and artist may discuss some following options: continue for 2 more years, remove the sculpture by the artist, donate the sculpture to the city by the artist, or the artist can sell it to the sculpture to a third party. So can everybody see my shared screen here?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So first of all, I guess before we get into, does anybody have any questions on kind of what we're asking the Arts Committee to do this evening with this agenda item?
Yes, I do. Like, is there a motion? Are you looking for input or approval, or?
We are looking for input. As the discussion happens between the committee members there, I think that it will become kind of clear of what you want to do with these specific locations, or the artists and the locations. And then again, Eva's going to provide some information. So we can further this on with the work plan item later on, or we can make a recommendation if the committee feels like you're ready to the committee or to the city council. But we also think it might be a good idea for the to see if anybody wants, if the subcommittee needs to do any further investigation or homework on the locations. There is a subcommittee for this item. It is Member Black. Okay.
Oh, I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Yes, Member Richards.
Yeah, is the selection of these sculptures final?
Yes, they have been selected by the Arts Committee. The Arts Committee was in kind of the middle of the decision of where to put them when the consistency slowed down a little bit, but that's just because of the engineering and staff side for the concrete pads. So we are back with updated information on the pads with updated costs, and now we're jumping back into the conversation of where to put these particular sculptures. But the sculptures have been applied by the artist and then approved by the Arts Committee.
I would like to make a suggestion.
Sure.
Okay. Jenny Holland, who was on the committee, was the chair, and I think her and Peter were the committee together who worked on this. I took it over when Jenny left. And I saw Jenny this week, and we were talking about this, and she had a suggestion which I thought was very valid. The sculpture that looks like a concrete block is actually 4 blocks. And she was suggesting, and I thought it was a very good idea, that we put that at the Dartmouth Circle, because she felt the long tube was much skinnier than it appears, and that it would look kind of silly in the center of a large round location. So it's something to consider.
Thanks, Member Black. Yeah, and we will, I think that the best next course of action is I'm going to kind of get through these locations and get through these sculptures, and then at the end we'll have a discussion as a group, and that's a great point. And I'll take note, and if we need to bring it up again with the committee, we certainly can. Okay, so the first location is Masonic Avenue in Washington. You see a few pictures of the actual location. If you can kind of see my pointer here, this portion, this landscape portion is the grass here. This portion where a gentleman is standing is this back area right here. Here is the pieces that Cheryl was actually just referring to. And keep in mind that this particular sculpture does not need to sit on a pad. It can sit directly on the ground. These are massive pieces. They can also, there is a different angle picture in your packet, but they can also be arranged differently. They can be in a line, they can be kind of cattywampus, setting aside, or they can fit together in a square, as you see in this picture. The next location is called Rotary Hill. It's at Solano and Masonic Avenue. It is directly behind this bus stop right here. It's hard to see with the shadows here, but there's a rock right here, a large rock right here, and that has a Rotary insignia on it. And Rotary also maintains this space, landscapes it. That's why it's called Rotary Hill. The pad size that was suggested for this area is a 3 by 3 by 16 inch. That is the height. Keep in mind, staff wants you to know that 8 of those 16 inches are below ground. The other 8 are above ground. So only 8 inches stick up above the ground. And the previously selected art for this location is organic column. It is this one here. Again, you have in your packet a few different angles. Keep in mind, it is only one piece. Some of them do show kind of 2 pieces in there, but it is one piece. And then the last location is called the Dartmouth Circle. It's very near Dartmouth Street on Masonic Avenue. Here is a overhead view of it. And then here are a couple side views of it. And then the previously selected art for this location is the Barred Spiral. Now, this is an interesting location because it is a very large space for a pad. It is 20 feet diameter. And again, it will go in the neighborhood, we believe, of 8 inches below the ground to have a footing down there. So it's a very large piece of concrete, and that is why the quote is high for that. However, continuing this conversation, staff has learned some new details about a few of these locations and the pads. So I'm going to hand it off to Eva right now.
Thank you, Liam. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I thought I would chime in here a little bit on the Dartmouth Circle. Actually, Liam, that was good if you could have that last screen up there just while I'm sharing some of my thoughts. So besides COVID, one of the sticking points and one of the delays is really the engineering of these 2 pads. And the one that Liam talked about at the Rotary Hill is pretty straightforward, 3 by 3 that was identified and approved by the artist of the spiral. However, the Dartmouth Circle, what was proposed by the committee was to basically 8 inches high, fill the circle with concrete. And we just needed to get that engineered. So staff reached out to Ware Architects, and they're based in Berkeley. And John Ware was able to create some drawings of a basic pad that the committee suggested. And I also just mentioned that, you know, as an architect, we were open to other ideas. And what did he see at this location that would be aesthetically pleasing? And the thing that really jumped out at him is just how there's already benches at this location, but just what a wonderful site this, what a wonderful site this is, that it is viewable by BART passerbys, you know, they're up above. And what the committee has said numerous times is it would be great to have a really large sculpture here eventually. And touching on what Cheryl said too, is that potentially, you know, this was our first round. So these 3 sculptures were selected, but potentially in the future that it could be something more substantial, something that wasn't just 2 feet diameter, that it really did reach out. We always kind of used the idea of like a spider. It had 8 locations to be secured into the concrete, and it could be pretty amazing. So going back to my conversation with John Ware, is that he saw it as, he definitely drew the 20-foot diameter circle, but also suggested making it more of a conversation piece. And he had the idea of adding a seat wall around it. And we like that idea of it being a seat wall where people could really convene. So he did draw up another drawing that included the 20-foot diameter circle of concrete and also the seat wall as well. And so what you see here, the pad that was quoted was, we went to our concrete contractor and it was about $38,000. So adding the seat wall would definitely be more, but I'm going to fast forward in my conversation with John Ware is that he also happened to mention in my conversation of a local, meaning living in Albany, very well-known concrete architect named Mr. Chang. And some of you might have heard of him. Some of us in Albany had, and he's a very well-known cement architect. He does mostly known for custom homes, commercial product design firm. He's also based in Berkeley, his business. And what else about him? He's an award-winning designer. He's a best-selling author. He's internationally known for his sophisticated residential design and innovative use of materials in various homes. And I'm going to show you his website because I decided to reach out to him and tell him about the sculpture loan program and just see if he had some time to discuss it and see if he had any thoughts that he could provide. And what I found out is he used to be on the arts committee. I'm not exactly sure what year. I think it predates all of us. But he was very, he understood the process of how public art works and a committee. And so I didn't have to go through that. He understood all of that. But having lived in Albany for about 50 years, he was incredibly generous with his time. He was willing to share his ideas and really was interested in making this site a conversation piece in Albany and something that the committee, could be really proud of and have their legacy. So maybe if you stop sharing, I'll share mine. Second. Okay. So I just put this to be looking here to my right, but he has, of course, a beautiful website and many different photos, but this is just, is Marin Modern. He has homes that he's done interior, exterior, all over the Bay Area, actually California. And just go through some of these pictures as we kind of look at them together, just so you kind of get a taste of what he's capable of. Again, I'll go through some of the talking points that we talked about when we actually visited the Dartmouth site, but he's really big on using different textures, different materials. He actually felt that 20 feet diameter was a lot of concrete. It's also expensive, but that an 8-foot diameter piece with a different texture kind of around the outside would be sufficient for a sculpture. And you can just see that aesthetically, he's always adding some sort of flair, not just your basic concrete, but really, truly beautiful work. There's a bathroom and a different angle of the bathroom. So that is that. And then while I have this up, let's see here. He also, can you guys see this PowerPoint presentation?
Mhm.
Nod if you can. Okay, great. So I want to show you this too. He has done a very similar project. So when I told him about this, he said, let me send you something. Not that ours would look like this, but this is a private residence. So you can tell that he does high-end work. But this is just some images of kind of what he was talking about using different textures. This obviously includes a seat wall. You'll see that some of it includes lighting. This is a pretty intricate design, as you can see, just the different textures. But mostly I'm showing you this as a way to get a feel for his type of work. You can see that there's pebbles. He also suggested the use of pebbles. And I mentioned kids, and he said, well, there's a way you can secure them so that they don't end up all outside of what you're doing. So yeah, so that's a little bit of that. So I just put those together. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
I have a
Yes, you keep muting yourself, but go ahead.
I'm
Yes.
sorry.
That's okay.
I know him from various places. Did you talk to him about price?
Yes, we did a little bit. And I was gonna, yes, it's
Extremely expensive.
he's extremely expensive, and that,
He does fabulous work. Do not misunderstand.
yes, exactly.
I've
And
been
so,
to any number of his designer houses when he invites people to see them, and they're
Yeah.
remarkable.
they're remarkable.
That having been said, he's very expensive.
He's very expensive. However, he mentioned on more than one occasion that he was really excited and interested in having a piece in Albany that he could contribute to. And that he mentioned, of course, he has these connections and that he would be really wanting to work within the committee's budget if they wanted to do something, bigger at this location. If you guys just decide that you want to do an 8-foot diameter concrete slab or bigger or whatever you decide, he will do great. And maybe he can give us a little bit of the input. But if we wanted something bigger and to spend a greater amount, his thought was today, as we go through this work plan and PAPP process, and maybe even next month, to think about what do you see at this site? What do you see long term? Is it something that's kind of more simple, but maybe we can add some design elements to it? Or is it something that, he also mentioned that if the committee is interested in adding a seat wall, that you can phase it. So you can just do the concrete pad in the beginning, and then maybe the next 2-year cycle that you put more money aside in the PAPP, or maybe it's two PAPPs down the road, but that it can be phased as well. So at this point, I think the ultimate, if this is something that's interesting to the committee can also say, no, thanks for checking in with him. And I think he already gave us a lot of great information that is to really think about long-term of what you want to see at this site. And knowing that, we have our sculptures for the next 2 years, but down the road, what do you see at this location and what are your intentions? Besides what I've already mentioned, as far as funding, just to touch on what Member Black said too, is he's also worked on different projects that seek outside funding. And so that might be something that might be a possibility, and staff has to look into this too, is something like a GoFundMe where there's a match perhaps, is that an option as well too? So I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it. So I think that's my piece on this location and my conversations with him. And turning it back to Liam, if you want to take over, or if it's Member Gatch can take away. If staff has, if the committee has any questions for staff, maybe that's the next step.
Yeah, I was thinking if members have any committee members have any questions for staff, as well as, again, there is one person on the subcommittee. If anybody would like to increase the committee members on the subcommittee, and again, we don't need this one in this place location tonight, but a discussion about it is certainly important. And if you have any homework, let's pass those along to the subcommittee for them to come back and then report back to the committee. So that's kind of, Eva, if you had anything else to add, that's kind of how I saw this agenda item moving forward.
Yeah, and based on the staff report, it's those 2 items. So the pads and the specifications of those, and then also the location of each sculpture.
Being the committee for this particular thing, first of all, I would like to say there should be more members on this committee. I just took it over when Jenny left. I really do not, I'm glad to help other people do it, but I run the gallery for this committee, and that takes, it will start to take up more time once we start to open up. So I would like other people to join in on this venture.
And really quickly, Chair, Chair Gash, I believe we had an attendee who has a public comment. So let's have, if there's any questions for staff from any committee member, let's go ahead and get those now. Then we can bring in public comment. And then if anybody would like to address, if there's a question in there, and then discussion. That is, I think, the correct next steps for this process.
Member Goodman?
Yes, is this, does BART have to approve anything that's happening on that circle?
Yes, they do. And that is in the staff report as far as next steps, is that the next step is once it is decided what is going to go on Dartmouth Circle, that one is on BART right of way. So we'll have to go through that application approval process.
So before we get too much into design, does BART have any restrictions or obvious prejudices that are going to affect their decision regarding whatever we decide?
I don't know exactly, but my assumption is that our public works director looks at the site, has looked at the site very carefully, and he's the one who said no squares, no corners. We have to have a circle just for tripping hazards. So he's really looked at it as far as ADA accessibility, tripping hazards, everything like that. I assume they would be looking for the same things. So not that I know of, but yes, I mean, we will have to go through the application process to know 100%.
I have one suggestion, not directly related to the pads, but to the sculpture loan program when you raised it in the beginning, which is that I would like to see the compensation increased for the artists. That right now, $1,000 for a 2-year loan of a work where the artists are obligated to maintain it as well as deliver it, install it, and take it away. It's quite possible that they would go into debt over loaning their work to the city. My recommendation would actually be to triple it, that it would be a $3,000 stipend for artists that are loaning their work to the city.
And this amount came from staff's internal research of looking at other local cities too. So I think it would be great if you wouldn't mind, or the subcommittee, to just find out what other cities are doing and what's kind of average. And but that's definitely an option, especially now as we're working on the PAPP. So.
Great. Member Abrams?
I second the idea that we offer more money. And that brings up a question about insurance and vandalism and stuff like that. Who's required to carry the insurance? Is the city going to cover acts of vandalism or even acts of God if something happens to the sculpture? I'm imagining that the value of these sculptures is pretty high. And so how is that covered? And last, I have a lot of thoughts about the pad. I think that your artist, your concrete artist, I'm familiar with his work as well, and I love his work. I don't know if we need anything that fancy because that might detract from the artwork, but I'd rather, maybe that's for another time. But as far as the insurance and payment, what are your thoughts?
As far as the insurance, I was trying to look up in as far as the master plan and what's written. If I'm remembering correctly, and I'll have to look back and I can send this out after the meeting as well, is that both the artist and the city would have insurance. Anything acts of God that would be, that wouldn't be on the city. That would be on the artist. And again, what the city has done as far as forming this program, our sculpture loan program, is that we did take descriptions of how other local cities have done it. So long answer short, I have to look into the insurance question, and I can definitely get back to you.
Member Black? Yeah.
I believe that the forms that I looked at recently said that they were responsible for the insurance.
Yeah, that's my memory as well.
Yes, it's the artist is responsible for the insurance.
And that includes also installation, is that
installation and all of that, yes.
And and that if Public Works our staff would be on site during installation so that we assure that it's done correctly and make sure that irrigation isn't damaged upon, that it's done right. But other than that, it would be on the artist.
Yes, I believe that's what's in the forms.
A question. What is the minimum size of a pad we would need for this sculpture? Do you have that?
And are you directly referring to the Dartmouth Circle or?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. So in previous discussions, it was determined that they would basically fill, if you can remember that picture, basically fill the circle. So right now it's just grass, so fill that.
Yes, but they don't need that big for that sculpture.
They don't, but they're also thinking long-term. So they're thinking, okay, after 2 years, what do we ultimately want here? So if you put a 3-foot diameter, that's not enough for what you ultimately want at this site. But that's for the committee to decide as well tonight. Is 20 feet way too much? Is 8 feet more is better? 12? What's the ultimate goal, and what do you see at this location? I'll also mention too, Member Black was mentioning swapping, if you 1 and 3, Dartmouth to Washington, that the meet me at the corners, right? There's actually 4 corners that can piece together like this, or they can actually go out. But it would take up a lot more space and may fit better on that concrete pad. That if we do that, the committee would need to then get a smaller sculpture, which would the fee wouldn't be very much, to put at this site for the barred spiral, because that does need a pad. Does that make sense?
Just really quickly, for a frame of reference, a 3x3 by 16, so 3 feet square with a 16-inch depth is $850, according to the quote that we received.
Rotary Hill, right?
At Rotary Hill, yeah.
Right, so not much.
Right. So, I mean, what we were looking at with Mr. Chang is his work is an art in itself, I think.
Oh,
it's an installation art like Goldsworthy or something. And it would certainly be worth the expense to design it and have it in our community. But I don't see how that goes with the sculpture. And the sculpture, just because I can't imagine we need 20 feet of concrete. That just sounds like way too much to me. I mean, we could think about making a meeting place like that, a whole bunch of different places. I always wondered why we don't put some on Key Route. Is that because of the neighborhood?
These top 3, the sculpture loan program is something I believe the Arts Committee saw as being a long-term program. So that these are the 3 initial sites that were determined based upon the Ohlone Greenway Improvement Project that was several years in the making. And this art piece was just one piece of that improvement project all along the way. But no, I think the master plan outlines the locations that have been predetermined, and I'm sure there's a lot of locations all throughout the city. One of the ones that had been mentioned, just my memory, is along Solano Avenue, also trying to choose places that already had concrete, so maybe a bulb out, or so you don't actually need to pay the expense of a pad, that a lot of these sculptures can just go directly into the sidewalk concrete, and then when they're done, they take them out and they fill the holes. So that's an option. So Key Route, I would have to check. There's 12 sites on that have been determined by the master plan that are off limits for a program like this. They're kind of these hot places for big art. But other than that, locations around the city could be on the next tier of the sculpture loan program.
Okay, I get it. So these are pre-selected, and in the future, they could be more other places.
I think that's the ultimate goal, yes. Yeah.
Okay, but still, I just don't, I just don't get why it has to be all concrete. I mean, even if you had a concrete pad and you wanted a bigger one for the next sculpture, all you have to do is make it bigger. It's just concrete. It's, it's not something that is that difficult, to pour, as long as it isn't art, as we suggested. So I just think it's too big.
If we decide to move to move the cubes to that place, the Dartmouth Square, all we would have to do is actually level that, and the pieces could go in there without a pad altogether. So we wouldn't have to do a pad in that place because we have the 4 cubes that are big and hefty and will just stay there. And we could do 2 smaller pads at the other spots, and then we could come back and rethink it in 2 years what we want to do with the Dartmouth circle, if that seems more reasonable to people. Because I agree with you, that's a lot of money to spend for a concrete pad. And if we can avoid that and still have a nice sculpture in the middle of that Dartmouth circle, it makes more sense in my mind in terms of scale. So Sarah, we can't hear you.
Wait, hold on. Member Abrams.
Sorry.
Member Abrams has had his hand up for a while now. Let's go to Member Abrams.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. One is, where is this money coming from? Because what Member Black just said, it's a lot of money for a 20-foot circle. Is that coming from our public art funds? Because that's a huge chunk of that public art funds. It's almost, what is it, 30%, 40% of that. So that's a little overwhelming right there. I agree that 20 feet for that piece, for any of those pieces, is pretty large. My last comment is that, I do think that these pads should be as simple as possible. They are not part of the art, and so they should be almost invisible underneath it.
To really quickly answer your question, Member Abrams, yes, it will come from the Art and Public Places Fund, which has come from the Art and Public Places Ordinance, which Ann Hirsch referenced earlier. And that was $187,235 plus or take $10 in there. I can pull up the numbers really in a second here, but yeah, that's the same funds.
Yeah, okay.
Member Goodman?
Question, one thing I'm not quite understanding. Could if we switch, then the tower, that circular tower that was going to be on the Dartmouth Circle, that could go where the 4 square concrete blocks were going to be, and following from what Robbie was saying, then they could just be on a smaller pad because you can barely see it. You can't really see the ground in that location anyway. Is that right? And then following from what you were saying, then if we wanted to take up Mr. Cheng's offer, that's going to take a couple of years probably if it's a highly designed piece to go through the committee at the pace we run anyway. So I think that actually sounds like a pretty good solution. I hate the idea of spending that much money just on a ugly expanse of concrete. So yeah, I mean, combining what you folks were saying, that does seem like a good solution if that's something that we want to decide tonight. We could decide tonight, I should think.
Can we, Chairman, can we decide this tonight and actually move forward? That would be lovely.
And just 1 second, I'm sorry to keep interrupting. If we have any more direct questions for staff, let's get those right now. We do have a public comment and then we can bring it back for discussion.
So the question for staff is, can we move ahead on at least some of this now?
Yes.
Great.
Any other questions? Any other questions for staff before we take public comment? Nope. then we will go to public comment. And again, I would just like to remind the public that this is comment specific to this agenda item, the discussion of the public sculpture loan program. And if we could set the timer for 2 minutes.
Hi, good evening. This is Jeremiah. I have one question, really one question. It's the only one that is kind of like the elephant in the room. I mean, where are these locations selected again? I mean, I believe it's the Ohlone Greenway. So I'm just curious. I'm not sure if any of these represent, 100% the Ohlone people's culture, or what, anything to do with the Ohlone. I'm just wondering, has anybody reached out, city staff, has anybody reached out to the Ohlone people to see if, maybe they might approve of this artwork? Or I'm not sure, but I think circles are a really big thing. I don't want to go into too much because I may be incorrect, but I believe circles are a native Ohlone shape that's significant. I would just, with all due respect, I would just hope before making any decision, acknowledging the Ohlone, and maybe reach out and put some native artwork on the land. Or instead of putting all this cement, why don't you create a community garden? I mean, it's just grass right now. Why not just grow a garden? And all that cement, you can get damaged packages of cement in Home Depot way back in the left in the backyard. You can get pallets for 67 cents. I mean, cement's cheap.
Great. Thank you. Do we have any other public comment? No. Okay, then we are now into the discussion. And I believe committee members can also submit motions at this point. Member Black?
Question.
Oh, Member Richards, sorry.
You just said we're into the discussion. Weren't we already discussing it?
Those were questions for the staff based on the presentation. And now this is the discussion among committee members to decide if anyone wants to propose a course of action and vote on that course of action, as I understand it. I'm new to this too, so.
Oh, okay.
But that's my understanding, and staff can jump in if I'm mistaken there.
I don't think we need to take up too much time on this, but traditionally when there's a larger item like this, Member Richards, that the staff is presenting a staff report, there's a chance for all the committee members to ask questions, and then it goes to public comment, and then it comes back to the committee for discussion. We blended the lines a little bit there, but it's not like we're taking away the discussion that already happened from this. We're just now we are into the committee discussion portion of this item.
Yeah. Member Richards, do you have something to follow up?
Yeah, I want to make a motion to make a decision.
Yes. Yes.
I second that motion.
There you go. Now we need now we just need a motion.
And again, just really quickly, I just want to remind the committee what is being asked of you in the staff report tonight. And that is that we are asking that the Arts Committee provide input on the design of the 2 concrete sculpture pads and the placement of the selected sculptures. So if you would like to make a motion, can we try, and it can be multiple motions, but let's try to encompass those 2 requests for the committee.
All right. Member Goodman, followed by, looks like Member Black also has a comment.
Okay, well, why don't I throw out a motion and then people can discuss or make a new notion to supplant it. So I move that we switch the switch the two sculptures. The one that is currently supposed to be on the circle go to the area near, is it Portland Street? Or is it Washington Street? Washington Street. Right?
Washington.
Yeah. And vice versa. And that under the one that's now going to be in Washington Street and under the one at Solano, that the two pads be installed so that they are as unobtrusive as possible. And in other words, to a small size, as small as they need to be. And that there is no concrete pad to be placed on the Dartmouth Circle.
Right, but it needs to be leveled. The Dartmouth Circle needs.
Yes, whatever they have to do to prepare the ground for that should be done, yes.
I second.
All right, we have a second. Staff does that mean we now go to a vote on that motion? Okay.
Yes,
so-
please.
I mean, I think you discussed the motion, and then if somebody has an alternative motion, they can propose that, and that one gets voted on first, I believe, is how it goes.
And I do like to go back and craft these a little bit better when I listen to the words again. But a motion was made by Chair Goodman to switch the previously decided locations of Sculpture Lane along the Ohlone Greenway, Dartmouth Circle for Washington Street, and deciding to place a 3x3 by 16-inch pad at the Rotary Hill and Washington location, and have no pad obstruction at the Dartmouth Circle. And then it was seconded by Member Black.
Okay, so this motion is up for discussion, and people can also propose alternative motions.
And if there's no objections or changes, you can just do a roll call.
Okay, any objections or changes? Then we'll do a roll call vote. Member Richards, how do you vote?
Yes, or can I say something different?
Yes, or yes works.
Okay.
Member Bergman, do you approve the motion?
Yes.
Member Goodman, do you approve the motion?
Yes.
Member Black, do you approve the motion?
Yes.
Member Samansky, do you approve the motion?
Yes.
And Member Abrams, do you approve the motion?
Yes.
And I also approve the motion. So that motion has been approved.
I was just going to add too, and we'll go into this in the work plan, but be thinking about if anyone else would be willing to join the subcommittee with Member Black. And also the subcommittee can talk a little bit further about the details of the exact dimensions, if it would look exactly like the one at Rotary Hill, and what they see the Dartmouth Circle looking like as far as leveling, and if that's decomposed granite, and they can come back for approval. So thank you for the discussion and moving forward.
Great. The next agenda item is Spring into Haiku. Member Goodman, I believe that's your show.
So I'll move through this quickly. There's three aspects of this. One is I sent Liam today the text for the for the description of the forthcoming haiku project, which is titled is Celebrating the Season with Haiku and Pandemicu. So we're looking for haiku kind of people dealing with a pandemic. And proposed what's going to happen is that there will be a website managed by the city where people will be able to submit their haiku for the program. The tentative date this is going to run is from March 20th to April 30th. Starting as soon as March 20th is maybe a little iffy, but I'd like to finish by April 30th. And so I sent all that stuff to Liam, and the city has some legacy material that you can use to create that on the city website. Another part of it is what we mentioned before, and this is not officially a part of the city, but it's a Facebook group that I set up over the weekend, and it's called, what is it called?
Haiku by the Bay.
Yeah, Haiku by the Bay in Albany, CA. That's the title of it. I felt it was important to mention Albany, and especially to mention Albany, California, because there's so many Albanys around. Facebook is a very public place. I think I mentioned before that the Facebook group is viewable by anyone, but it is restricted to members who live, work, or go to school in Albany. And we've already got some submissions, and I'm looking to get a lot more. So I'd appreciate anyone sharing that. Let's see. Oh yeah. Yeah, so you can find it pretty easily on Facebook just by typing in a group, Haiku by the Bay in Albany, CA. The other part of this, which is somewhat related, is finding a new poet laureate who in previous years has helped manage this program. Rebecca Black, the previous poet laureate, said she would be willing to help out, which is great. But we'd certainly like to find a new poet laureate in the city, and I'd actually be open to any suggestions from anyone in the committee as to what they think this new poet laureate might be, whether it should be a single person that it has been previous times. We've had 3 so far over a period of maybe 6 or 7 years. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a single person. It could be a concept. It could be a rotating bunch of people, or it could just be open kind of volunteers, which sounds good, but actually I think is maybe a little bit unmanageable. So I'm just wondering if, unless it's a single person, does anyone have any other suggestions for how to handle a poet laureate in Albany?
Member Black.
Yeah.
Peter, wasn't there a poetry group at the library at one point?
Yes, that was disbanded, I think about 1.5 years ago. Of course, the library hasn't had any meetings. I think Becca Black has been working with the library to get that going again. And there is a poetry group, I believe, that was meeting under the banner of Calliope at the St. Albans Episcopal Church, which did have a kind of a budding art group there. I'm not sure what's happened with that.
Friendly reminder, Arts Committee. I know that you did a great job dovetailing that there, Peter, but the poet laureate, we should agendize it and talk about it as a specific agenda item. However, it is on your work plan, which is a future agenda item on this. So
Okay.
We can continue that conversation then.
All right, well, we'll continue it later. I was hoping to sneak it in, Liam, because it's been on my mind, but I understand. Okay, so as far as the Spring into Haiku, that's where we go. It's going to be up on the city for public submissions, and there'll also be a Facebook group. And if anything good and promising comes in on the Facebook group, I will work with the poets there and manage to get those poems submitted into the city program as well. So are there any questions about that?
I have a question for you, Peter. Put you on the spot. What would you, as a new member of the Arts Committee, how can we help? What can we do?
Well, if any of you write haiku, or if you have friends or you have kids in the house, you want to make it a nice project for your kids or your nephews or something, anyone can enter. We're very welcoming. We're not very judgmental. We do ask that people try and keep it to the roughly 17 syllables, but beyond that, it's pretty much anything goes. I would just share this. This program only works if it has a lot of participation, and would just love it if you could share the Facebook page so people could see what's going on. When the city site goes up, you'll be able to go there. So just, spread the word. That would be the best thing to do.
Member Richards.
I just started seeing that Albany e-news, like in the last couple months that I've never seen since I've lived here. Is it possible that we can advertise the hike, Spring into Haiku on that e-news?
Yes. Yeah, through all the city outlets, the city should be promoting it. In previous years, we printed up 500 postcards that the city gave away. I don't know that we have the budget to do that this year, and people aren't circulating around as much. So I think we'll probably be restricted more to newsletters and social media.
Great. If there are no other questions, do we have public comment? All right, no public comment. Then can we move on to the next agenda item? Is that the right course of action here? It looks like we are at agenda item 6.3, which is a pretty heavy one. It's the public art projects plan and the PAPP and the work plan. And I think the main objective of the discussion of these two things tonight is really to get people to sign on to specific projects that they want to work on for the next 2 years. Is that correct, staff? Is that my understanding? All right. And how should we do this? Should I pull this up? Liam, do you want to pull this up? Do you have it in front of you?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Gash. To answer your question, yes, as well as just keep in mind that this was from a discussion at the previous meetings. Staff took a lot of the discussion that you had, and we created this. So this is also your chance to say that's not what I said. That's not what I meant by that. Members, just as Chair said, we do want a name for all of these. So keep in mind, where you would like to venture into some of these projects. And then, yeah, please be patient with me. Chair Gash had some technical difficulties, but I will pull up that document so we can all see it.
Okay.
It was also included in your packets.
And then, is this also an item that, like Member Richards suggested at the beginning of the meeting, that we time box this? We may not be able to get to everything or make definitive conclusions on everything. Do we want to set a certain amount of time? Does anyone want to propose a certain amount of time to discuss this? Be bold. Member Richards.
How many items are there on
The number of items on the work plan are currently at, it looks like 9 items. But some of those items, for example, the first one has, it looks like, an additional 7 sub items.
20 minutes.
20 minutes. All right. Let's do this then. It looks like it's not coming up there. I think I might be able to share it on my end. Let me see if I can share it.
I can do it, Chair Gash. I got a little over my skis today. Put too much on the old desktop. I got it right now.
Okay, so I believe in the last meeting, we had already discussed recent initiatives and accomplishments. And I think we can focus on the next section tonight, which is the policy review and initiatives. These are the initiatives that we want to work on and see funded for the next 2 years in Albany. So we're just going to go line by line, and we'll move through them, and we'll see how much progress we make in 20 minutes.
And just one more thing, Chair Gash. So the first thing on here is your PAPP. Again, that is the mechanism for spending the money that staff and Hirsch talked about earlier today. And this will be another task for you. So again, we don't need dollar amounts on this right now, but it's certainly something to talk about. For example, if you want to increase that stipend for the sculpture loan, or we're not going to spend as much on pads, so on and so forth. Okay, I'll stop.
Okay, and if we
I'll add one more thing. Should we start with questions and then go to public comment and then come back for discussion?
Sure, we can do that. I'm amenable. I think one question that I have right off the bat is, are we expected to make motions? So for example, if we wanted to increase the sculpture loan stipend, would we be making a motion to include that on the PAPP at this point?
I'm going to give a shot at this, and Eva, please chime in where we don't quite get it. I think that we should do it very similar to how we've created this document that's before us. I think that we should discuss each item. I'm taking great notes. And then when we have this to a sound place, I think then we should then pick up the PAPP and say, here's what we said here. And we can, again, connect those dots. And then we get a nice package of a PAPP and a work plan that we then take that whole. So we make a motion to take both of those pieces together to City Council. So you don't need motions to make these independent changes on here, but when it's in a place that you are comfortable with, then we will take it to then you will take it to City Council.
Okay.
I'll add to that. Yeah, is tonight it's really just a discussion, and the hope is that we've done a great job of taking everything that was mentioned in the last couple meetings and putting it into a draft, and that at the April meeting, it would be almost ready to go to council, and that's when we would make a motion. And as we mentioned too, as you go through some of these items, you know, we talked about sculpture loan. So what is the amount that you want to set aside for the PAPP? For Black Lives Matter, what is the amount? What does that look like? Does not have to be finalized, but a discussion tonight would help guide the process, I believe.
And Ava, can you remind everyone on the committee about if funding goes over the $10,000 mark, how that changes the allocation of the funds or the approval of the project?
Sure. Is it in relation to a specific item on this work plan, or just in general? Just in general.
If I remember correctly, you said that if a item is over 10,000, it triggers a different approval process than if it's under $10,000.
Yeah, and it's not just the PAPP, it's one specific project. So for example, if it's $10,000 for the sculpture loan, that wasn't kept under the $10,000 threshold for the same reason I'll mention. But for example, if just using an example on the work plan, if the Black Lives Matter art project, the idea was to create one mural and give an artist $20,000, what that, as you're mentioning, that would trigger, because per the master plan, anything over $10,000 does trigger the necessity of a selection panel. And it's all written outlined in the master plan of what that actually means. You bring in community members, staff, and members of the actual committee to go through the process, interview, it's very specific in the questions that they need to follow and consider going through that. So the reason something like the community projects, the threshold was $10,000 or under, was to avoid that process, just because it does make it a little bit more lengthy and arduous.
Great. Thank you so much for that clarification. Okay, so are there any other additional questions before? I guess, as Ava was suggesting, we should do questions first, then public comment, then discussion. So if there are any other questions, also in this view, I'm just going to say I can't see everyone at the same time. So so just unmute yourself and jump in if you have a question for committee members.
And Aaron, you should be able, there might be 2 little lines between our pictures and the shared screen. You should be able to move that to your left. Yes. There we are.
Although it's still, let's see here.
Sliding.
There we go. There we go. Oh, it made that text so tiny. So now you get to see me looking really, really close to try and read the text.
Sorry, Chair. If it's better for conversation as well, this document is in your packets. We don't need to share screen. Whatever is easiest for you folks.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions regarding the PAPP, then we will go to public comment. And again, bear in mind, public comment should be limited to the agenda item at hand, the public art projects plan. And if we could limit the time again to 2 minutes. Right, your time starts now.
Hi, this is Jeremiah. Thank you. I guess I didn't get my public comment hand raised within the, I don't know, 5 or 10 seconds. I don't know if there's some policy yet on after you say, hey, we're going to open it up for public comment. I'm not sure how much time goes by, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. I raised my hand as quick as I could. I think I was maybe like 7 seconds after you said it. I don't know. But I missed it for Haiku. I was going to do public comment. My hand's been raised this whole time. I might as well talk about this because all I could talk about is this agenda item anyway. So I don't know. I didn't see anything on here about the anything approved or anything regarding, Ohlone art or Ohlone anything. I was just curious about the Black Lives Matter. Is one of the locations? Is there a location already picked for something yet, or is this still up for discussion? I don't know. It's been months. It's been so long. I know the Ohlone Greenway project has been talked about for a while and what to do. I just hope someone takes some action and does something, and also funding. There's a lot of things could be funding. I mean, maybe Ohlone, the Ohlone may even want to sort of, somehow we can have a fundraiser or something, some sort of, fundraiser or car wash or something to generate funds,
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have any other public comments? Okay. Then we can go through the PAPP. Do we want to discuss any changes to the sculpture loan program? Member Goodman?
Well, I think in line with what we were talking about, we might put in something about input on the location and perhaps development of sites, so that we have some freedom to, say, talk with Mr. Cheng or anyone else for any other ideas that come up for developing locations.
Okay, and Liam,
Member Goodman, can you provide maybe specific verbiage that you would include?
I used placemaking, Peter, which sounds like you were alluding to.
Okay, that sounds good. Can you squeeze it into a sentence?
I used development of sites, beautification, and placemaking around potential sculpture loan locations.
Great.
and Liam, you've already included my suggestion of increasing the stipend. Do we have other committee members that would like to attach their name to the sculpture loan program that would like to work on that? Member Abrams? Great. Is there anything else to discuss about the sculpture loan program before moving forward? And do we have an amount associated with that already?
Yes, let me pull up the PAPP.
Was raised to $10,000 in this last PAPP, and that includes the $1,000 artist stipends, 3 of them, as well as the plaques and the two sculpture pads, which would be approximately the 3x3 pads that we talked about tonight.
The next item is community projects, micro projects, recommend funding for new projects. Do we have anyone who wants to address that or take that on? My understanding is this is short-term community funded funding projects within the community. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the definition, there's a whole description of community projects in the process. And I touched on it before of being a 10,000 or under projects. So that can be, you can look at that on your own for the master plan, but that's essentially what it is. Yeah.
And is there a specific number of those projects within the PAPP?
No, and that's up to the committee to decide upon. If they want to establish the next one in the next 2 years to say, okay, you know, in the beginning of 2022, we'd like to open up a call for artists, and by the end of that year, have a new something. That's the timeline.
Okay. Member Goodman?
Just point out, these are not necessarily short term. They could be, but not necessarily.
Okay. Just smaller scale. And do we have individual members of the committee that are interested in working on community projects or micro projects?
I will do that.
Great. Member Szymanski? Any other comments or questions about community projects and micro projects? All right, moving forward, Black Lives Matter mural art project. This is a project of which I am currently on the subcommittee. Member Abrams has expressed interest in working on this as well. I apologize for not reaching out to you about this at this point, but we can continue to work on this. My recommendation for this project in terms of funding allocation would be $10,000 as a starting point for this project, and to think about the project beyond being a mural project, but to think about how we could solicit a socially engaged project that still meets the ordinance and is in support of the movement for Black lives and social justice. Are there any questions regarding that item on the PAPP?
Chair Goodman, are you okay with the way that it's written right now, or are you proposing that we take out the mural?
Chair Gatch?
Oh gosh, I did it. Yes, Chair Gatch. Thank you.
I'm proposing, I think mural is too limiting for what we're potentially seeking. And my only concern, like I said, about having the name be Black Lives Matter is that I want to make sure that we are not speaking for anyone, and that we are not taking on a position where we're potentially stepping on the autonomy of an organization.
If you have alternate, not that you have to do it tonight, but alternate verbiage for this item too, please share that with staff as well. And also for the record, Member Goodman was like chair for like, I don't know, 18 years. And so it's just stuck in our brain that we keep mentioning it. I apologize for both of us.
I am not offended. And if Member Goodman wants to wear those shoes again, I would gladly trade with him. So that's
look much better
great.
on you.
Really quickly, Chair Gash, just piggybacking on what Eva said, there has also been a couple procedural questions from the committee. So this is a perfect example of, there is a subcommittee. Chair Gash and Member Abrams are on that subcommittee. They can discuss it and work on that name that staff, that Eva was just mentioning, and then they can bring it back to the committee. Committee can approve, discuss, go back to the drawing board, so on and so forth. So again, we've had a few procedural questions, and that is how the subcommittee committee relationship generally works.
Okay. Next item is graffiti abatement, and I think I haven't been keeping time exactly. I think we're quickly approaching that 20-minute mark. How are we looking, Member Richards? Where are we at with the time here?
I didn't know I was the timekeeper.
We're at about 18, 19 minutes. Just
All right. Next item is graffiti abatement. Committee will explore the development of an application process for murals on locations of concentrated graffiti identified by city staff and recommend funding. Recommend a funding allocation. Member Goodman?
This looks like it goes, it belongs in part with item number 3, which is actually not part of the PAPP. So I don't know how these two things dovetail, but perhaps it would be the same person who is working on graffiti abatement that is also working with the Economic Development Committee on developing murals.
Do we have someone who would like to take that on?
I think it might also go under micro projects if you think of it as a mural project and not graffiti abatement, which, will happen, I guess. So it could be there too.
I agree. I'm more comfortable with the sentiment of supporting murals than abating graffiti.
Me too.
As an arts committee, we should be supporting.
Well, the graffiti won't be there if you put the murals there. So let's do murals.
And this is the item that came from the city and in our conversations with Public Works is that there are facades that get tagged and graffiti all the time. And wouldn't it be great if the Arts Committee could help the city and the city would identify the locations and then the Arts Committee would go through the process that's outlined in the master plan as far as how to get artists to do the work.
Well,
I still think there's an overlap there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think anything that involves a mural is going to automatically graffiti abatement. You're really talking about a place, the city asking the Arts Committee to figure out where to put murals so as to avoid graffiti, right? It's
right.
Not graffiti abatement per se, but it's where should murals go, and that's really belongs with the Economic Development Committee as well as with these community projects. So it's just kind of, I guess I would say that there's no point in assigning any particular person to this since it's going to come up in discussion of all the other anything involving a mural. We could just keep it as part of the PAPP, but not really assign it to anyone as a standalone project.
My understanding of it, if I understand correctly, is that there are sites that have already been determined where it's thought that a mural would be good, and that the Arts Committee, whoever takes the lead on this, would maybe be responsible for putting out the RFQ for murals and bringing it back to the committee to select and approve or advance a mural for approval from the City Council. Is that correct, or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, and staff usually puts together the request for proposals, but definitely that the subcommittee would provide input, as would the committee. And I guess the difference that I see with these items is that whose property is it, right? City-owned property versus private property. And what we've discovered in some of the recent projects is that that's a very different process as far as insurance and using public funds. And so I think there's a distinction there too, but I agree that the umbrella is definitely there under the murals too.
Do we already have a mural subcommittee?
You, right?
Yes, I'd definitely be willing to work on it. I did a lot of legwork on murals previously, and I'd be happy to step up and do that again. I hope that there would be somebody else on the committee to join in.
Great. Okay, and the next item is the heron sculpture. Yes, Member Richards. You're muted.
I was confused by the language for this one of investigate options for the rehabilitation, relocation, and removal. Those things seem contradictory to me. Are we getting rid of this thing and looking for something else to replace it, or rehabbing it?
My understanding is it's an open question at this point, that city staff has identified that there, if it remains that it needs to be repaired or restored in some way, but that the budget for that is, or the cost of that is approximately $7,000. And that if we wanted to consider an alternative to restoration, for example, removal or soliciting a new project at that site, then that would be whoever takes that on would lead that. Is that something, Member Richards? Yeah,
I'll take it.
great.
Who can I just go to for help? Because I don't really know even what it is, what it looks like.
Member Richards, you can always reach out to staff to help connect some dots, so we can help with that as well. As well as the committee placed the herons there and has discussed the rehabilitation about this before. So there's some history to this as well, which we'll put your name on the work plan now, and then when we get towards the end of this and we're all solidified with everything, and then the committee members are tasked with their next steps. We will certainly work on with you that, and past committee members can provide support as well.
The next item is research opportunities to place art and along the BART path pillars and recommend a funding allocation there. I realize we are over our 20-minute mark. Is everyone okay with moving forward to the end of item 1 on the of this document of the PAPP? So we get through line G here. Yes.
I'd say we should go ahead, finish 1.
Yeah. Okay, great. So this is the BART pillars, which was a project taken up by a previous committee member. And there's some research that has been done on that. Is there anyone who is interested in pursuing that or who has questions about that? Member Richards? You're muted again.
How is that different from the sculpture along the Ohlone Greenway thing? Aren't they on in the same area?
My understanding is that they are, the BART pillars are on the Ohlone Greenway, but it's a separate feature specific to supporting the BART tracks. And that requires, I guess, a separate conversation with BART if anything were to be attached to those.
Okay.
Super quickly, Arts Committee, when we put out a request for proposals back for the Creek Art project, which was a past work plan, one of the proposals we got was these beautiful stencils on the actual pillars that hold up the BART tracks. Piqued the interest of a lot of Arts Committee members, and so committee members have always wanted to see if we could do that with BART, but no one has had the time to do it. So it's a very expansive, but it really is just murals, stickers, I'm trying to think of the term for that, decals on the actual BART structure, whereas the sculpture alone are underneath the BART tracks. They are not part of the actual fixed building of the BART tracks.
And a previous member of the Arts Committee did quite a bit of work on this too, so he would be available as a resource for anyone who wanted to jump on this subcommittee. And BART has also expressed, a number of staff and the committee have, they've expressed interest in adding more art to their stations and their pillars. And so I think there's the confluence of their interest in more art.
Eva, do you know if BART has separate funding for projects that end up on their on their property or on their
I
structure?
believe they do, yeah, because they also have been adding, again, more art to their stations and along the inside, outside and everything too. So that would be could be part of that too, is maybe there's a funding match.
Do we have anyone who would like to work on that or be a point person for that potentially in the future?
I'd be interested in, I'd love to work with somebody, I guess, if I can work with whoever was on the committee working on this before, that would be helpful. And if Bart's interested, then yeah, I'd do some research on it and find out.
Unfortunately, that committee member did very recently step down because of just personal time. However, he was a great researcher. He left some information staff can provide.
Okay.
And it brings up another great point where, which is that as projects finish and subcommittees flow, more people can go on to other committees. Just keep that in mind to everybody. And there's also a lot of stuff on this work plan. And if some things just can't have a name to them and we can't get to everything, that is okay too. But it's important to make sure that you're aware of that and we either put it down towards the bottom or say future discussions about or something along those lines.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Member Abrams, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Next item is research opportunities to place art on utility boxes, and if there's a recommendation for a funding allocation there. Again, this was a project that I think was taken up by previous members of the Arts Committee, and there may be some available research in that regard.
And council members have expressed interest in at least researching what the opportunities are. Previously, the Arts Committee members have gotten a pretty solid no that it wasn't allowed, but that was, I don't know, I'm going to guess here, over 10 years ago that was true. And so the questions come down from council of, is this an opportunity at this point in 2021?
Certainly they've done that in Emeryville, so I can't imagine why it wouldn't be allowed in Albany.
And Emeryville owns their utility boxes, so I think there's a discrepancy between owning your utility boxes and going through a private utility boxes and a company, and that's, I think, the research that needs to be done. But yes, Emeryville, Oakland, there's many examples nearby of cities that have wrapped their utility boxes.
All right, any takers on that one? All right, well, we can leave it there for now and then come back to it. Just as a quick time check, we are now 2 hours into the meeting. Do we want to continue? Do we want to table things until the next meeting? Is there a recommendation from committee members or staff?
Just to quickly review the timeline as well, and is that, again, the hope is that the April meeting, that staff would come back with almost a final draft of the work plan, and that work would begin on the PAPP, which would be a shorter process, hopefully, and that would go to council either in late April. They meet twice a month on the first and third Mondays usually, so it would either go, if there was time, to the last meeting in April or first meeting in May. And that's our timeline.
All right, anyone on the committee have a strong feeling one way or the other about continuing to get through this or tabling it?
How much longer do you think we have till we can get through this?
You're asking me. You've been on this arts committee way longer than I have. We have, I think, looking at it, I mean, my take on it is, there are a number of projects that I think people have already expressed an interest in from previous conversations. That it may just be aligning people with different projects that they're interested in. There are 8 other items, but this first item had 7 sub items. So we may be able to get through the other 8 items rather quickly. We could give it an extension of, I'd say, another 20 minutes and just see what we can get through. I suspect the next few will go quickly. And then maybe also just to kind of help things speed along, if you've already had a chance to look through it and you've identified items that you know that you want to work on, then maybe there's a way, maybe we can, I don't know, elicit that in some way. You can express it as we kind of go through the items.
Chair Gash, this is also an opportunity for the staff, for committee members to take a look at the work that staff did per your conversations as well. So that's another angle, is that if you'd like to get through these and make sure that they are to the conversation that we had and that they seem informative and that you'd like to move forward on them, the next meeting, you can, the committee members can digest what they would like to help with and move forward with, and we can move through these items and say, yes, no, or yes, 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 yes.
Great. The next item there is Haiku. I think we have at least one person who wants to work on Haiku.
Yeah, I'm resigning. Yeah, well, so let's just, this is a given, so that's fine. We can move on to the next one.
Okay.
One thing yeah, I mean, it's obviously more than just applying for outside funding. I'm not sure why that's there. Because there's other parts, but is there some reason why that is part of the work plan?
It is on there just to remind staff of why, or remind committee members and staff as well, why it's not up in the PAPP, because it is not, again, fitting the description. So you just need to find the funding from the outside source for it. So it's just drawing that difference between the PAPP items up here at the top and other items down here at the bottom. Fall into Haiku does have some funding associated with it. It is found by you through the Albany Community Foundation. So it's reinforcing that portion of the item.
Got it. Okay, thanks, Lee.
Not to be a bug about this, but how, if in the past, the Fall into Haiku program has existed as physical objects installed throughout the city in the form of, metal and paper and signage and so forth, print, which I think falls under the ordinance. And in this future iteration, it looks like it's taking a digital form, which also falls under the ordinance. Could the funding for this not come from the city fund?
Well, if you ask me, yes, we'd have to work with the city attorney and clear it. And as far as this year is concerned, we're okay, thanks to the generosity of the Albany Community Foundation. But that is definitely something we can explore as part of the Fall into Haiku program, as well as the Art in Public Places Ordinance number 6 on this list.
Okay. Great, thank you, Member Goodman. The next item is collaborate with Economic Development Committee, which is continue to seek collaboration with Economic Development Committee in the creation of a mural program and on expanding the arts in commercial areas, explore the feasibility of public art and vacant storefront programs. If I remember correctly, Member Abrams, did you still have an interest in this?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So we have at least one name. Is there anybody else that wants to express an interest in working on this? Member Richards? Great. Can we move forward to number 4, Albany Community Center Foyer Art Gallery exhibits? Member Black, I believe that's you.
Absolutely.
All right. Are you looking for any collaborators on that?
I'm pretty good, and I usually have found that when I need help, I can usually find someone on the committee who's willing to help me, but it's not a big deal.
Great.
In case I'm out of town, that's the only way that goes.
Okay.
I'm good.
Fantastic. Then number 5 is the Albany Poet Laureate. Pursue the recruitment of a new poet laureate and make a recommendation on the allocation of funding there.
Yeah, I'll take that on.
Great. Anybody else? Okay. Then we are at number 6, art in public places ordinance. Explore the possibility of expanding the use of art in public places funds. Maybe staff can weigh in. What in terms of putting that on the work plan? Is this a research? Is this advocacy?
We're still on 6, right? The art in public places ordinance.
Yeah.
This is a common, perfect example is today. This is just a common question that often comes up between the committee. I think that it is something that the committee has wanted to talk about. It's why it needs to be on the work plan. One of the members wanted to inquire with the city attorney about some of the definition of these arts. So if that is still something that that you want clarification on, I think it's important to have on the work plan. Another important part is remembering that this all goes to the city council for approval, and you're kind of pleading your case of what you're going to do for the next couple of years. So I think that having an in-depth explanation of kind of what that is, how we got here, why you would like to use money for other options other than just the definition is an important informational piece to bring to the body that you're advising.
Member Richards?
Does this mean that you could revise the definition so it isn't just visual art, but it could be performing art or music, that sort of thing?
That's the debate. Yeah, that's the exploration. Do we have someone who wants to work on this? Spearhead this? I'm happy to lean in on this one, but I would like to work on this with someone ideally.
I'll do it.
Great, thank you. Number 7 is citywide arts promotion. Explore ways to increase visibility and awareness of the arts in Albany.
This is one that's been on the work plan for a few years. I think that it sounds a lot. It is a way for the arts committee to, when Fall into Haiku comes out, I'm on the Albany Arts Committee. We do this wonderful project. I don't think that it is necessarily acting on certain instances of public art within the city, but just being an advocate and being on the arts committee in the community is just important to express what your actions are, what you're tasked with, and who you're advising. So to answer, I don't know if you necessarily need one person specifically on that task. It could also just be an action, a communal action by the group.
Okay. Great. Then maybe that'll be a communal action, unless we have someone who wants to spearhead it. All right, moving forward. Number 8 is municipal art participants. And I also want to mention that number 9 is explore the feasibility of an artist in residence program. 8 and 9, in my opinion, might very well be tied together, but could also be exclusive. They could be separate items. Municipal art participants refers to recommendation to fund an intern, employee, or volunteer liaison between Albany Arts Committee and current or prospective public artists. I think this can also be, like I said, it can also be more expansive and be a sort of artist in residence program within the city, like Berkeley is doing. For example, Berkeley has, I think, a couple of artists in residence that have gone through different city departments. Where artists come in and work in the capacity of artists in municipal government and lend their creative services in that regard. I'm happy to put my name on this one. And if anyone wants to work on this as well, you're more than welcome.
And Chair, just for your brain, and as we move through this work plan project, this is just another one that the Arts Committee hasn't had committees and commissions don't necessarily have interns and volunteers as well. So this is another example of, it's wonderful you're putting your name to it, but also if it's something that the committee wants to work on, this is the time to update the committee, the city council on kind of to justify it, why you need it, what's important about it, in taking those next steps.
Okay. All right, then we are at number 9, I believe, which is explore the feasibility of an artist in residence program. And this could or could not be tied to the municipal art participant item. For example, it could be something in the form of using a vacant storefront as a artist in residence for short-term periods or long-term periods, months to years. Is there anyone who wants to take this up? All right, you can tentatively put my name on that one too. Any questions, comments from committee members on items that are on here that we did not address? No. And staff, can you just kind of update the committee on next steps?
Gonna let Liam unmute yourself. Yeah,
I got it.
go for it.
Yes, there is next steps. So again, I am taking notes on the conversations that you had. We're going to continue to work on this document here, change it. Eva can speak to this quickly. I don't think we necessarily on this item put your names to it, but we want committee members to know what they're working on moving forward. And then we will also bring back that PAPP so that you can now start connecting the dots between funding and the work plan and the PAPP. And then hopefully in April, if the committee feels comfortable where this document is at, we can approve it for moving on to council. And then Chair Gash, you present it to council and we can work on that scheduling as well. And then going over these in this time between meetings, committee members can certainly think about what they have time for, anything else to pick up upon it. You have not missed out on your opportunity to sign up for a lot of these sub projects.
Great.
I'll also mention too that the work plan, this is the big, it would start July 1st, 2021 and go through June 30th, 2023. So it's a big 2-year time period. That being said, committees can revise their work plan, the Arts Committee is the only one who has the PAPP, but that also can be revised. So we also will go to council. Chair Gatch will have the staff's support at that meeting as well. We won't leave you high and dry, but we'll present it together. And but you can come back at a later time and say, gosh, we thought we only needed 10,000, but this is why we need 15,000.
Great. Member Black, you had a comment?
No, actually, I had a question for staff. And it's kind of, I should have asked it when we were talking about the gallery thing. Do we have any sense yet about when we're going to open up?
No, I don't think that we have a sense right now, but I think that we are moving towards that direction. I think that if you look at numbers across the country and numbers in California, I think that the reason why we closed the community centers, those are starting to be better numbers, but the city and the recreation part, we aren't going to do anything that would put any of the public at risk. So it will still be, a conservative approach to it. But how's this for a non-answer, Cheryl? I think we're far closer to realizing that now than we were maybe in November or just after Thanksgiving or something like that.
Okay, just checking because
we are working, and in all seriousness, staff is working on appropriate ways to do this and when we could potentially do that. So I do know that we will come to the committee, specifically you, Cheryl, about when there could be a potential for opening up public buildings.
Terrific, because I have my artists, the artists are waiting. They are very patient.
All right, and to go back to an earlier question that you had, Cheryl, I think it will take us 18 minutes to get through.
That was good.
All right, so that looks good. We are through all those items. We have already solicited public comment at the beginning following the questions for this item. So that brings us to the final item, which is item 6.3. No, item, I don't see it. There's a future, it's future agenda items.
Correct.
So if there are future agenda items, you can certainly submit those to staff at a later date before our next meeting. But if anyone has future agenda items that they would like to say now, Member Goodman.
Yeah, the poet laureate and the spring into haiku, I'll give you an update.
Great.
And the work plan and PAPP is on the future agenda items. So keep that in mind.
Great. All right. Well, if there are no other agenda items, then thank you everyone for your service. And I think we are adjourned unless I have to do any other
That was great.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.